G'day guys, Ben here from Solar and Sat. Once again, we're back in the workshop with Jackson and Kyla Cartwright's truck. The only difference is this time, we're not putting in a temporary power system, we're actually putting in the permanent one for his brand new canopy that he's just had installed. Let's go take a look. All right, now there's a whole bunch of stuff that Jackson and Kyla wanted us to wire up in here. So a lot of this job was actually just running cable runs, mounting lights, hooking up their compressor, hooking up their pump, putting switches around the place, more USBs and GPO outlets than you can probably poke a stick at so they can charge all their gear when they're on the road, use all their equipment. The basic specs in here are 24 volt, 600 amp hour in terms of the lithium battery bank. So that's equivalent to a 12 volt, 1200 amp hour lithium battery bank. We've got two Shervy 190 watt solar panels on the rooftop tent, so that's 380 watts of solar. Not a huge amount of solar considering the size of this system, and that's why we've installed two Victron Orion 1400 DC-DCs. Now, being an Isuzu truck platform, 24 volt starter battery, 24 volt house battery, we actually can charge at 100 amps 24 volt off the alternator setup. Of course, it does require an upgraded alternator. As of right now, it's only got the stock one in it, so we're just going to be running one of those DC-DCs, but it is ready if Jackson and Kyla decide to go ahead and upgrade that at a later date. Then we've got a big 5 kVA MultiPlus inverter charger in there, hooked up to its own dedicated AC subboard. There's a couple reasons for this. Obviously, it means they can use multiple 240 volt appliances at once. If they're using other equipment, they can perhaps cook using their induction and a kettle at the same time. But it also makes it very easy to feed power to their caravan. And because it's got such a big battery charger, it can receive power back from the caravan very quickly as well. Obviously, the caravan's hooked up to 3000 watts of solar. So if they park up somewhere for an extended period of time, they can just run the van over to the truck and charge it up nice and quick. Gives them a nice quick way to charge between the two. Now there's a whole bunch of other intricate, interesting stuff to go over. Obviously the reason we've gone 24 volt, dual converters in parallel, how we've gone about approaching redundancy and making sure it's as reliable as possible when they are off-road. So that's the sort of stuff we might head into the office and I can really take my nerd hat out and go over all the details with you.
With this canopy, we've gone 3 different boards, plus obviously some more external boards. In this one board, obviously we're going to fit it up in this part of the canopy up here for all your chargers. So solar charging, DC to DC charging, and a fuse block, all 24 volt outputs. In here we've got the drop down slide with the fridge, so the only room we have in here is up against this wall. So very minimal room, so we've made it nice and compact, slimline. On this board here we have the 2 Orions, 70 amp output, obviously for 12 volt into your fuse blocks. The other one's just redundancy. So you've also got the Servo GX unit, that'll be paired up with the Touch 70 screen. In here we've also got the 2 12-way fuse blocks. We've got plenty of loads going into this, so 12 volt loads and 24 volt loads, so it'll make the whole system go together and nice and neat. Then we've got the big links distributor, and then obviously we've got our main fuse and our shunt on there. He's obviously got 8 GPO outputs. That's to charge laptops, iPads, GoPros, drones, the whole lot, so we can go away filming. As well as we've got 6 2-way 45 watt USB-C chargers on here for his GoPros and all that as well. So he will be working out of this truck as well. He's got plenty of output and equivalent to 1200 amp hour of batteries going into this as well. So going to make a great system.
The whole design principle behind the truck. We're going to start with the truck, we'll get onto the caravan afterwards. We'll talk about sort of why we picked the system we did, why we went the voltage we did, all that sort of stuff. So first things first, they were basically the same system in each of them. So we went a 5 kVA inverter, 24 volt battery system, 600 amp hour of battery capacity in each. So bear in mind, that's the same as 1200 amp hour at 12 volt in each setup. And then we went dual DC-DC chargers in each. So the new Victron Orion XS 1400s. They're good for 50 amps of charging each, and that's a 24 volt, so very quick charging off DC-DC. And then we went for obviously solar systems on each, obviously a much larger one on the caravan, a lot more roof space. On the truck, they carry the boat on top of their new canopy, so of course we couldn't put any solar on that. However, we did put 380 watts of solar on the rooftop tent, which should help offset some of the fridge consumption. We are on the truck primarily relying on alternator charging though, to keep those big batteries topped up. And obviously they are a fairly large battery bank, but the draw on the truck is comparatively not that big compared to the draw in the caravan, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So the idea is as long as they go for a drive every so often, that alternator will obviously charge up the truck's batteries and they can sit still for a while. Now, the alternator in the truck is a stock standard alternator as of now. Jackson in particular said he wanted to just run with the standard alternator for the time being. He's had some dramas there in the past. So we're only running one of these DC-DC chargers at the moment. So we've got one turned off, just waiting, ready to be turned on in case he does decide to upgrade it. For the moment, he's running on the one. And then aside from that, obviously being a 24 volt system, we needed to convert the power back down to 12 volt to allow him to use all the typical accessories that they normally use. So what we did was we put in a DC to DC converter, 24 to 12, and then we put a second one in. And the idea here was it ticked off the redundancy tick box that the Cartwrights really wanted us to get ready for them. So I suppose they had a few requests that they wanted us to meet. Obviously they were pretty happy for us to design the system, pick the components, do whatever we wanted in terms of that sort of stuff. But they had a few key things they wanted. So one, they wanted a lot of power. Now the idea of course is they live on the road full time. It's not quite like if you go away for a weekend or a week. When you live on the road, it's a little bit different. You need to be able to run everything that you bring with you and use everything you bring with you whenever you want. So you need a big enough system that them and their entire family can use all their stuff without having to be inconvenienced by it every single day without going to a caravan park. Because obviously what they do is they don't go to caravan parks. So the system needed to be big enough to handle that. But the thing they said that was even more important than that was reliability. Because if you have a big system and it turns off on the second day, well, what's the point of the big system if it doesn't run? So they said the most important thing was that it was reliable and redundant. Jackson said reliable and redundant to me a dozen times in multiple different conversations. So we made sure it was reliable. Now, going back to what I was saying, 2 DC-DC converters, 2 DC-DC chargers, and obviously we had the solar array. And using the Victron gear, the idea there is if any individual item fails, the other ones will still function. So you need multiple failures to shut the system down. And on the DC-DC converter side of it, the idea is if you've got your 24 volt system and it's spitting out 12 volt for you to use your components, if you just had one DC-DC converter and it failed for whatever reason, got damaged, whatever, then you've got no power, even if your system still runs. So we put in 2, and the idea there is even if one lets go, you've still got the other one working, they can still use everything. And then it's separate to the caravan. So even if one of them would completely stop working altogether for whatever reason, you've got the same size system, the same capacity in each setup. That is the definition of redundancy. You've got a full backup system if you really needed to. And each one is nearly capable of running both by themselves, especially the caravan. By both I mean both loads. So each system can handle either the full truck's capacity and the full van's capacity, or the van could handle the full truck's capacity and the full van's capacity. So lots of redundancy built in. I think we ticked that box thoroughly. And lots of power. I think 1200 amp hour equivalent in each is plenty. Obviously the major goal of the truck was to make sure they could charge all their camera equipment, their GoPros, their laptops, their phones, all that sort of stuff. Obviously it's what they work out of. So they worked with All Terrain Warriors to get this truck expedition ready, the big super singles, the GVMs, the winches, all that sort of gear. All Terrain Warriors has done their part and they've done a fantastic job of it. Then Concept Canopies did their part. They built the beautiful box system on the rear, obviously get the whole canopy, carry the boat, carry all their equipment, carry all their gear safely, and give us a spot to mount all our stuff. Obviously they did build us the battery boxes up, so they called us up. The boys at Concept were all over it. They gave us a yell, said, hey, how big are these batteries? How much room do we have to allow you guys? And then they built some storage boxes to allow us to fit these batteries in there. Then came our job. Obviously, the whole idea of this is they want to do their filming, their recording, bring the content to you guys, and we need to make sure they had sufficient outlets to charge all their gear. We put PowerPoints all over the place, we mounted them all over the canopy, and the idea was that they can keep bringing the content to you guys and not be restricted by not being able to charge gear. They want to be able to charge everything at once, just plug it all in so that when they wake up the next day, they can go again. So between ATW, Concept and us, I think they've made a heck of a touring truck that'll tow this caravan nicely and get them going where they want to go.
Ain't going anywhere.
And then aside from that, it was basically just a standard 24 volt electrical system. We didn't do anything too crazy. They wanted it to use off-the-shelf parts. They wanted it to be simple so that Jackson could follow it, understand it, and if he needed to fix anything or work on it or add anything later, he knew how to and he could do that.
So just running some 35mm square twin up to the battery compartment. Then we're going to be running it down into the back of the truck to run the compressor and the water pumps.
The hole's about this big and the cable's about this big. I can't get it for obvious reasons.
We did add a little bit of our own sort of electrical trickery in there. Obviously the Victron systems are very flexible. They let us do all sorts of things. So we did add one particular feature that we'll go over at the end because it kind of applies to both systems. So I'll touch on that at the very end. But moving to the Caravan. Caravan, much the same. As I said, the specs are basically the same. Big difference, however, is it's got just over 3,000 watts of solar on the roof. So heaps and heaps of charge. Obviously the Caravan is the one that the family live in. It's the one that all the kids will be using power in. It's obviously the one that they'll be cooking out of, all that sort of stuff. So its consumption is much higher. The battery bank is the same size, but the solar system is huge. And the idea there is they can use heaps of power and they can recharge it nice and quick. They can use their air conditioner, all that sort of stuff. Still got DC-DC charging, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec, but it's got those dual DC-DC chargers on there as well. And then basically just the full Victron suite. You know, it's got the Touch 70, you can use it to monitor your water tanks, all that sort of gear, 5 kVA inverter hooked up to everything. Obviously, originally it was actually going to come up to us in Bundaberg, where we've got our full team and our typical installation crew, and we were going to do the system up here. But timing, that worked out the way it did. Obviously, the Cartwrights were going to have another child, so of course we ran a little bit tight on time. So what ended up happening instead is I actually jumped on a plane. I flew down to Melbourne. We worked on this caravan. We obviously fitted up the system. Same design as the truck with the dual DC-DC chargers. Obviously 3 kilowatt solar array. Kokoda took control of mounting the solar system. All we did was wire it up internally. And the idea there was 3 separate 1000 watt solar arrays, 3 separate cable runs, 3 separate regulators, 3 sets of breakers. And the idea there was any singular failure only knocked out 33% of the array. Very redundant, lots of charge speed. 3000 watts is a crazy amount of solar to have on a caravan. And Kokoda really did make our lives fairly easy for us. We went into their factory, they showed us through it, talked about the plan, spoke about the design with us, they ran some cables for us, and then even at our place, they sent their head electrician over to have a chat to me and we could speak about the electrical design, make sure we were all on the same page. They were fantastic to deal with. It's a great change of pace working with a caravan manufacturer that's happy to work with the customer and happy to work with us as aftermarket fitters. So we spoke with them, they planned out that rear area, gave us plenty of room, and they allowed for the weight of our big electrical system, 600 amp hour of lithium, 5 kVA inverter. Then I grabbed my younger brother. He built up or designed up a mount to mount these 2 big heavy batteries right at the front, cut out some laser cut vents, and then obviously we put in temperature controlled fans so that the idea is once it got hot enough, the fans would kick in. We modified computer fans to keep it perfectly silent. Of course, they're all going to be sleeping in there, so we don't want it making a whole bunch of racket while they're all trying to sleep. And then of course, mount the inverter, all the typical Victron gear, you know, the dual converters, the same stuff that we spoke about in the truck to keep it very reliable and very redundant. And that's pretty much the 2 systems. Now, we did keep them fairly simple, like they're big, and there's an inherent level of complexity that comes with electrical systems. But as far as electrical systems go, they were fairly straightforward, easy to follow, just rather large. But what we did add, and we did this as a separate sort of part to it, I suppose, Victron systems are very flexible and they do let you do a level of custom programming. So we did install Node-RED on each of the systems. And the idea there was that once one of the battery banks got to a certain percentage, you could have power move between them. So we primarily did this from the truck to the caravan. And the idea was that once the truck's battery bank got to 80%, at 80% and above, what it can do is it can send power from the truck to the caravan. Now, obviously the caravan's the primary consumer. It's the one that's going to be using all the power. So the idea is, yep, 80%, those DC-DCs in the caravan actually charge off the truck's house bank. And the idea there is, of course, we've got 4 DC-DCs. So if they all kick in at once, that's too much power for the alternator. The idea is the truck's alternator charges the house batteries, and once it gets to 80%, then the caravan's DC-DCs are now allowed to take power off the house bank. And that's sort of on top of all the regular standard sort of stuff. So there is a level of complexity there that, you know, the Cartwrights were originally trying to stay away from, but the solar array is fairly standard. The truck alternator charging system is standard and the MultiPlus is a standard. This is the only custom sort of layer we've put into it. But the idea here means if the caravan's sitting there and they decide to go away for a day trip, they go around for the truck, they go for a drive, the caravan's sitting at home, got bad weather, whatever, or at base camp, I should say, it's sitting at base camp. They can drive around, charge the truck up to 100%, and when they get back to the caravan, they can plug it in and it will drop down to 80% charging the van and then stop. And the idea is they'll always have plenty of power in the truck, but they can still move power into the van and it never stresses the alternator. So it's very controlled, very measured, and allows a little bit more flexibility than you'd be able to do with a standard system. That's where Victron gear is really cool, and that's where if you can work with an installer that can sort of do these more custom fit outs, you can get some very, very cool results while still retaining the reliability you're chasing. So it sort of brought it into 2025 without really ruining that reliability that we were aiming for. So we put that custom firmware on both the truck and the caravan, made them work together. And the idea there is they've got 2 very powerful, very capable systems. They can, in worst case scenario, plug a 240 volt extension lead, same way you would at a caravan plug, from either one to the other one if they had to move power the old fashioned way. But this just means they've got a level of autonomy that they don't have to think about. One less thing for them to think about on the road, I'm sure is helpful. That's like the final really cool piece of the puzzle that I think let these 2 very, very powerful systems work together seamlessly while still retaining independence between the 2 of them. Hopefully you guys found that enjoyable. Obviously it was definitely an interesting project to make sure we could achieve what Jackson and Kyla wanted us to achieve. And I think we've done a good job of it. They both seem pretty stoked. So I'm really excited to see them out on the track, see what they get up to with it all, and see all the gear in action. I'm sure you guys are as well. And if you want to check out more of our content, make sure you check us out on YouTube.